everyone, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Sandy.
And this is the Italian American Stories Podcast. Well, we just got done with the 4th of July. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, it was a great time.
Yeah, we had a barbecue over here at the house and bought like a little pool for the nephews and barbecued and lit off fireworks.
Yeah, lots of good food.
Yep.
A good time.
Yeah, it was fun. It was kind of cool because we moved into this house in February, and so that was kind of our first shindig we had at the house. Right. So that was kind of fun, but hopefully everybody else had a good 4th and everybody's enjoying their summer. I am definitely enjoying my summer, maybe a little too much. I texted Mom the other day and I was like, podcasting and summer break do not mix well because it is so hard for me to focus. And I think a lot of it is just buying a new house and wanting to get little things done at the house. And
yeah, you've done so much. You're in project mode.
Exactly. I'm in project mode with the house and I just want to keep doing things. And it's so hard for me to just sit and research and type. But as the summer days are ticking away, I'm starting to be like, oh my gosh, I got to get some scripts done. So we have episodes to do. But here we are and we're getting ready to go.
Yeah.
So last time we ended with our Esther Albano. And as we promised, we want to really start covering the Axeman victims. So we just want to bring their stories to light because they've been kind of forgotten a little bit.
Talk about the victims themselves.
Exactly. And, unfortunately, a lot of them died at such a young age that, we just want to bring life to their stories. So I kind of dug into this and went down a rabbit hole, just trying to find possible victims, Italian-American victims of the Axeman. And I think I've got it, like, the earliest possible victims of the Axeman. And so we're going to kind of head back to 1910, which, if you think about Esther Albano's story, that was 1918, 1920. So,
right. So this is 8 years earlier.
8 years earlier. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. In today's episode, we're actually going to talk about 3 families. We're going to talk about the Crews, the Rosetos, and the Davis. And we're going to start off with the Crews. The couple, they are August John Crewe and Harriet Crewe. And August, he was born on October 14th, 1867 in Biloxi, Mississippi. I love that name. I don't know why. I just think it's such a cool name. Biloxi, Mississippi. And his father, he moved to Mississippi from Italy, and he married a woman who was from New Orleans. And so the family, they eventually moved back to Louisiana from Mississippi. And so August, he became a fruit and vegetable vendor and would eventually go on to owning his own grocery store.
Of course.
Of course, yes. And all 3 of these families, they own a grocery store. So August's brother, his name was Peter, and he actually started his own business once the family moved to New Orleans, and it was a boat building business. And August, he would help out with that business, just every once in a while, help his brother out, but that was kind of before he started getting his grocery store going. August, he was actually married 3 times. His first wife was Marguerite, and they married on January 30th, 1892, but sadly, she passed away 6 years later in 1898. So then August, he then married a woman named America Marks.
Wow.
I know, it's kind of a cool name, huh? And they were married on August 10th, 1898. Sadly, she passed away as well. She passed away 2 years after they were married on November 16th, 1900. In 1903, August married his last wife, and her name was Harriet Marks. And that name
his sister?
Yep, exactly. So I was going to say that name should sound familiar because his second wife was America Marks, and this is Harriet Marks. And so Harriet and America, they were sisters.
Well,
so, I mean,
that happens a lot.
It does, yeah. I think probably a lot of it happens, through maybe grief and helping each other out. And so, but Harriet and August, they went on to have 5 children together. So, like I said earlier, August, he would help out his brother's business every once in a while. But once he got his grocery store going, that was his primary source of income, him and Harriet's. So just like the other victims we have talked about, August and Harriet, they were the grocery store owners, and their grocery store and home was all in one building. Yeah, exactly. So their dwelling was in the back. On August 12th, 1910, someone broke into the Crewe home in the middle of the night while the family was sleeping. Again, there's that theme of the Axeman of, middle of the night, family sleeping, grocery store owners, Italian Americans. Just a reminder. Harriet said that she went to bed around 10 p.m., but August, he stayed up playing cards with some friends. And she said he finally came to bed around midnight, but he woke back up about an hour later to go to the bathroom. And she said when he got back into bed, they both fell asleep, and everything was kind of normal until she was suddenly awakened around 3 a.m. by a strange man standing over her. And he was holding a meat cleaver, and he was holding their mosquito bar. So it took me a really long time to figure out what this mosquito bar is.
I've never heard of that.
I haven't either. And so it's basically like they would have a mosquito netting that would go around their bed. And almost every victim that we'll talk about from here on out had the mosquito bar and the netting. But the netting is hanging onto a bar.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. And so he kind of cut the netting off and took the bar. So he was holding a meat cleaver and the mosquito bar. And so Harriet said the man looked at her and said, quote, "Give me all you got. Come on now and give it to me." And so he's talking about money here. And so Harriet said she got up to get a box that had money in it. And this was when she noticed that August was laying in bed and he had an obvious wound to his head. So
good grief.
I know. And at that point she thought that he was dead. And so she went and she got a little tin box and she gave it to the man, and that box had $8 in it. And so $8 today is about $265, which that's still a lot of money. Yeah. And so apparently the man, he just took the box and left after that. But on his way out, he grabbed a bird that was in a cage. So he left the house, and apparently August and Harriet had a bird cage on their porch, and he took the bird cage with him.
Oh,
I know.
That's weird.
Very strange. And he later let the bird go because they found the bird cage and they saw the bird like sitting up on their neighbors' houses.
I don't have an answer to that one.
Me either. I'm not sure. I can't even connect that with anything. So he leaves the house, takes the bird, and he then crosses the street and sits on somebody's porch and just smokes a cigarette.
Wow.
Yeah. And then when he gets done smoking his cigarette, he kind of like relaces his shoes. So I don't know why he was relacing his shoes, but they referred to it as relacing his shoes and not tying his shoes. So I don't know if maybe relacing was the verbiage for tying your shoes back then.
Right.
And after he got done smoking a cigarette and lacing up his shoes, he just got up and left and walked down the street. Crazy, right?
Wow.
So at some point, Harriet, she went back into the bedroom to check on August, and she said she was able to rouse him, but he was really out of it and kind of would sit up but then collapse and couldn't really verbalize anything. So she knew at that point that he was in it. Well, and she could see the wound on his head, but that he was in a pretty bad state. And so
he should have been bleeding.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. I'm sure she saw the blood. And so she decided to go to the neighbor's house for help. And her neighbors, they didn't come to the door when she knocked. So she ran down the road to a patrolman's house and was able to wake him up. I mean, keep in mind, this is probably like 3:40 in the morning. They could have been sound asleep. So the police officer, he gets dressed and he goes back to the house with Harriet and he kind of starts investigating the home. And he would later say that he could tell the man got into the house by breaking the latch on the kitchen door. So while the patrolman was at August and Harriet's house, one of the neighbors came over to tell the officer what she saw. And I'm hoping during this whole time, like, somebody's getting an ambulance for August.
Yeah, that's what... Granted, there's no phones and
there's no phones, exactly. Somebody apparently does because he does get taken to the hospital. So anyway, so this neighbor, she comes over to tell the officer what she saw. And she said that she could hear Harriet screaming. So she got out of bed and she looked out her window and she saw a strange man in Harriet's kitchen. She said then the man kind of disappeared, which means that's probably when he went into their bedroom and she couldn't see him anymore. She just kind of kept watching, and then she saw the man leave. And when he was leaving, he threw something in the yard. And she said what was really weird was that the man made no effort to run. And she also corroborated Harriet's story because she said she saw him stop and smoke a cigarette and lace up his shoes. So the neighbor lady, she's over there, she's telling the police officers this, and she's like, well, I'll go find what he threw in the yard. And the police officer's like, okay, go ahead. Just like
so
no crime scene preservation here at all. And so she goes and she rummages through the yard and she picked up the thing that the man threw, and it actually turned out to be the meat cleaver. But yeah, she just goes out and gets the meat cleaver and gives it, here's your evidence. Jeez Louise. So 3 physicians, they came to the house to attend to August, and they discovered that he had 2 wounds. One was to the head and one was to the neck. And so apparently at this time, August is a little bit more conscious because he didn't want to go to the hospital. He was like, I'm fine. Just let me, I'm okay. I don't need to go. But the physicians and Harriet were like, no, you need to go. Let's not look in the mirror because you really need to go. So August, he ended up only spending 1 night in the hospital, and then he was released to go home. So August and Harriet, they do survive this attack.
I don't know how you survive a meat cleaver.
I don't either. To your neck?
Especially from a butcher shop, because they're keeping those razor sharp.
Exactly. They've got to cut through the meat, the ligaments, all of that kind of bone. And I don't know how you survive that either. I mean, it's just, and there's a few victims of the Axemen who do survive, and it's just insane. I don't know either. So Harriet, she also told the police that her husband had an enemy, but the man that broke into their home was not this enemy. Because remember, she interacted with him. Right. She had a conversation with him. I couldn't really find any detail about this enemy, though. It wasn't in her testimony. So I don't know if they just left that out when they released the testimony to the newspapers. But there's no detail about this enemy. Take that with a grain of salt, I guess.
Yeah.
But she was able to give a description. Actually, her and the neighbor were able to give a description of the man to the police. And I'm just going to read the description because it's very detailed. So it says, description of assailant. A description of the man who committed the outrage was furnished by Miss Crewe and Miss Schultz. So Miss Schultz is the neighbor. It tallies in every particular. He is about 5 feet 6 inches tall, broad shoulders, clean shaven, about 35 years old. He has dark hair and wore a blue jumper and dark trousers with a black derby hat shoved on the back of his head. His lips are described as being particularly thick and his nose thick and turned up. His voice was coarse and husky. The police say they know a well-known police character answering this description. They are on his trail and hope to have him under arrest soon. Quite the description.
And he's known to the police.
He's known to just off that description, they're like, oh, we know who that guy is. He's got real particular lips and a turned up nose. Now the blue jumpsuit, that will come up over and over again. Not in every single case, but I know for sure of 2 other families that are victimized later, and they say the man's wearing a blue jumpsuit. Oh, so, wow. Yeah, that's a little odd. So just remember that. There's a blue jumpsuit because it'll come up again. So obviously, this meat cleaver, this isn't an axe, right? And we're calling it the Axeman. But regardless of that, there are a lot of similarities to the other Axeman victims. Like we've talked about before, Italian Americans, grocery store owners, attacking the family in the middle of the night while they're sleeping. So the differences here with this is he's, of course, the weapon, and he's also asking for money.
Right, because the other Axeman would actually use their axe most of the time.
Exactly. He would find the axe in their yard, use that to break into their home because, that's how they cooked with their wood burning stoves and wood fire stoves and all of that and heated their homes. So their axes most of the time were just left out in the yard. So, but there's enough similarities where you can kind of make the connection, and who's to say that, he started out by stealing meat cleavers because that's what will happen in these early ones, and then switched to taking the axe out of the yard.
That's right, because this is 10 or 8 years earlier.
8 years earlier than our Esther Albano story. So now a detective, his name was John D'Antonio, and he was assigned to the case. He's obviously Italian. He spoke Italian, and he really worked with the Italian colony in New Orleans, and he pretty much had most of the Italian cases that would come up, whether that's burglary, attempted murder like this, those kind of things. And he understood the culture and all of that.
Right.
So
yeah. Can relate to everybody.
Exactly.
And get the story straight.
Yes, he can translate and yeah. So a few days after the attack, D'Antonio, he told the papers that they were puzzled by this and they really didn't have any leads at all. They had a few suspects that they kind of thought maybe were involved and they wanted Harriet to identify. But whenever they brought Harriet in to look at their suspects, she wasn't able to identify any of them. So, however, this all changed on August 27th when police were called to an attempted robbery at another grocery store. So when the police arrived at the grocery store, they arrested this suspect. So I don't know how this all happened so quick because, again, there's not phones back then, really. Right. So, I mean, there is, but I don't know if maybe somebody in the grocery store held him down until the police got there. But anyways, they arrested the suspect, and his name was John Flannery. And so Flannery, he was pretty well known to the police and was immediately questioned by the police regarding the attack on the Crewties. So they brought Harriet down to the police station to identify Flannery. And apparently, as soon as she saw Flannery, she positively identified him as the man that broke into their home.
Oh, wow.
She was immediately like, that's him.
Oh, good.
So the police, they came out and they made a statement declaring that Flannery was arrested and he was being charged with robbery and attempted murder. And the police said that the motive was drugs. Flannery, he intended to buy morphine and cocaine with the money that he stole from them.
So that's probably why he stole the bird and sat down and smoked a cigarette and set the poor thing free.
Yeah, he's like, fly, birdie, fly. Okay, so let's talk about Flannery for a little bit. He has an interesting past. He was arrested in 1904 for stealing gold, silver, and other valuables from the St. Mary's Church in New Orleans. However, he served no jail time for this because a doctor and the judge declared him insane. And he was sent to an insane asylum until he was, quote, cured. So he didn't spend a whole lot of time in there, obviously, because by 1905, he was, quote, cured and released and cleared of all charges. And it's hard to say what Flannery did from 1905 to 1910 when he attacked the Crewties. I did read in one article that he got married and him and his wife, they had a daughter together, but the daughter apparently died, and that kind of set Flannery off a little bit. I couldn't really verify that he was ever married and had a kid, though. So, because usually I'll read it in the newspaper and then I try to go to like Ancestry to find actual official records to verify it. I couldn't find any. I couldn't find a marriage or a birth. So take that one with a grain of salt too. But on September 8th, 1910, a grand jury indicted Flannery and he was set to go to trial for the attempted murder of the Crewties. So he pled not guilty to the assault and robbery, and he didn't have an alibi, anything like that. So he remained in jail while he was awaiting trial. But strangely, that same month, on September 20th, 1910, another attack occurred while Flannery was in jail. So we're still in the year 1910. So the Crewties, they were attacked on August 12th, 1910. And then on September 20th, 1910, another attack happened. Flannery is in jail, though.
Oh.
So that kind of makes this a little tricky because they think they've got this guy who's attacking this Italian-American family, but then this other attack happens. So this brings us into the story of Joseph and Concetta Roseto. We'll talk a little bit about their family history. So Joseph's parents, Giovanni and Marie, they came to America from Italy in the 1860s. And Joseph, he was born in Kentucky in 1868, but the family, they didn't stay long in Kentucky, and by the late 1860s, they moved to New Orleans. And in New Orleans, Joseph met his future wife, Concetta, and they were married on September 7th, 1893. And the couple, they were actually approved by the city of New Orleans to open up a bar room and grocery store in February of 1907. Just like everybody else, the couple also lived in the same building that the grocery store and the bar room were in. And sadly, this is where the couple was brutally attacked on September 20th, 1910. So like, what, a month and a week later? After the Crewties?
The first one,
yeah. So just like all the other victims, Joseph and Concetta, they were sleeping when they were attacked. Usually, though, the man seems to always be attacked first, but this time, Concetta, she was actually attacked first. And the assailant had they called it a meat axe in the newspaper.
I guess a meat
cleaver. Yeah. I don't know if this is where they're trying to make the
connection.
Axeman thing. So the first hit to Concetta, it hit her on her right cheek, and she apparently rolled over. And then that's when the assailant hit her in the back of the neck, leaving her with a pretty deep gash. And this must have knocked her out, knocked her unconscious, because then the assailant turned to Joseph. And like you said earlier, how do you survive these attacks?
Yeah, I do not understand.
Oh my gosh. So Joseph, he was struck in the nose, and his nose was split open, but he actually was able to immediately spring out of bed, and he grabbed his pistol that he had next to the bed, and he chased the assailant out of the house and fired 2 shots. He missed the assailant, but he hit a neighbor's home. Luckily, nobody was hurt, though. But because of all of this commotion and the gunshots, some neighbors woke up and figured out what was happening and sent for the authorities. So the police determined that the assailant, he broke through the kitchen window and then entered the bedroom. And the police were able to follow some footprints to a nearby barn, but they never really got anywhere with this. But nothing was stolen from the home. So that's a little different than the Cruties.
Right. Yeah.
So Joseph and Concetta, they were taken to the hospital. And after they were taken to the hospital, news of the attack traveled really fast through the neighborhood. And apparently a lot of their relatives quickly went to the house. A local newspaper reported that a lot of the Roseto women relatives, they just rushed into the house because, again, there was no crime scene prevention back then. And they were immediately overcome by the amount of blood in the bedroom. So much that they had to go back outside and compose themselves before they entered again. So some of these women, they told the police that the Rosetos had enemies, but they refused to give any names. So
well, that's not good.
Yeah, I mean, that, like, okay, so what is enemies? Like, maybe they didn't give a customer a line of credit because they didn't trust him. Is that considered an enemy, or is it something more? You know, it's hard to say when they don't give any more detail. And so this incident really left the police a little confused. It was so similar to the Crudy incident, but the police had already arrested Flannery for that. So, of course, now the police are like, did we get the right guy? Is this a copycat?
And nobody saw this guy, or they're not saying?
Nobody came forward saying that they saw this guy. Joseph really was kind of the only one who would have seen him, but, you know, it's dark, and my guess is he just had his pistol sitting right there on his bedside and just grabbed that.
Because the other guy had the blue jumpsuit.
Yeah. But they probably saw the blue jumpsuit watching him walk through the street.
That's true.
Yeah. So I think, you know, for Joseph, he was also hurt at this point too.
Correct.
So so a few days after the attack, the police questioned Joseph while he was in the hospital. Sadly, they couldn't question Concetta because she was in really bad shape and she actually wasn't expected to live. And Joseph recalled the night events to the police. He said that he is usually the one to lock up the business/house, both of them. But that night, Concetta did. He said, though, that he watched her lock the doors and latch the windows. So he really, you know, didn't think that they just easily entered in. He also said that he didn't know of any enemies. So the Roseto relatives are like, oh, yeah, they've got enemies. But he's like, I don't really know. Hard to say.
Not wanting to tell. Could have been a business under the table type thing.
Exactly. You never know. And then when they don't give those details, you're kind of just...
And he could be guilty of, you know, doing something with money that's not legal.
Yep. And like we've talked about before, there's, at this time, such a distrust with the authorities when it came to Italian Americans, you know,
that's true.
Kind of wanted to keep it within their own world.
Right.
And, you know, so, but he did say, so this is kind of his one thing that he offers up. He said that when he was marrying his wife, there was another man who wanted to marry her, but she chose him. So, you know, it's kind of like, yeah, probably not.
Yeah, for so many years passed, I can't see that.
It's like you come in and do that after all these years. So, but without any real clues or suspects, the police, they turned to the idea that this was a revenge attack done by the Black Hand. And when they asked the Roseto relatives, they denied this. So, enemies does not necessarily mean Black Hand. But there's just a lot of weird stuff going on here. And when the police were questioning Joseph about the Black Hand, he just grunted and shook his head no. Like, ugh, leave me alone. Don't talk to me about that. He did eventually tell the police, however, that he never received any Black Hand letters. And so Black Hand letters, from the research that I've done, the Black Hand would mail a letter to a business. And it was always Italian. So this is kind of the crappy part. Like, it's Italian Americans blackmailing other Italian Americans. And it's just like, oh, dang it. So they would mail a letter to a business and say, you need to pay us $200 for protection. If you don't, this is what could happen to your business. And so this would happen frequently. Businesses would get letters, and we'll actually get into some victims later that did get letters from the Black Hand. But Joseph is saying, I never received any Black Hand letters. So he doesn't want to talk about the Black Hand. You know, he grunts and shakes it off. He is saying, like, don't associate me with the Black Hand, I think is what he's wanting to do here. So 7 days after the attack, Joseph and Concetta, they were still in the hospital, but they allowed Joseph to go visit his wife for the first time. So, I think they were in separate rooms because his injuries, he had the split nose, but apparently it was still bad enough that he was in the hospital for 7 days.
Yeah.
And, she's not expected to survive. So she was probably in a more, I don't know if they had ICU back then, but something similar to ICU, And so the doctors, they did say that if she survived, she would probably be paralyzed on the right side of her face. Luckily, though, Concetta, she does survive. And both her and Joseph were released from the hospital a few days later. So,
good.
Yeah. And I could never really find if she had any side effects from the injury, like if she was really paralyzed. But so the couple, they tried to go back to as much of a normal life as they could. They continued running their business. The Rosetos, for them, the case went cold and the police really didn't have any suspects because they thought they caught the guy. But now, and there's no black hand, there's no true enemies. The only thing that they were somewhat sure of was that they thought the suspect wore a number 4 shoe size based off of the shoe prints that they found. I don't know if the sizing was different because I'm like, that's a really small foot.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how they rated those back then.
I don't either. But sadly, Joseph, he would die on November 25th, 1912. So, about a year and a half later?
Yeah.
And his obituary said that he was suffering from a long illness, and he was only 46 years old. So, I don't know if this was connected to the attacks or if he got pneumonia.
Right.
It's hard to say. Concetta, she died in 1940 at the age of 63. Once Joseph died, she sold the business, and I'm not really sure what she did after that, but she did sell the business, so maybe just lived with family.
But nothing ever came back in between that year and a half, like if it was an enemy, to come back to try to get them, finish them off or whatever.
Not that I found. So, nobody came forward like, hey, we heard that he owed this guy money or something. Nobody ever came forward. So it just, there's really wet cold.
And if it was the Black Hand, then he was paying them and everything was quiet.
Yep. Or he wasn't paying them.
Right.
And they
after this
true.
attack.
Yes, exactly. It's hard to say. So let's kind of get back to John Flannery because he's being held in jail during this whole second attack with the Rosetos. And he's waiting trial. And he was the only suspect in the Crewe case. So in November of 1910, when he's preparing for trial and everything, a jury actually found him to be insane and he was sent to the Jackson Asylum. So he never went to trial. He was never charged.
Because he had already been in one. He hadn't already been
released, yeah. But he was sent to the asylum with the terms of if he's ever released from the asylum, they could charge him again with the attack on the Crewe. So that's kind of John Flannery for right now. He comes back up later. But so technically, if you think about it, for the Crewe's, their case kind of went cold too in a way because it's kind of a half and half. Like maybe it was Flannery, but maybe it wasn't. And now there was no trial or anything.
Yeah, for the first one.
For the Crewe. Yeah.
But nothing on the Roseto.
Not even a solid suspect. So
that's why I'm thinking the Black Hand was involved because after the attacks, maybe he just started paying them off.
Exactly. And then for the Roseto family members to come forward and be like, oh yeah, he had enemies, but we're not talking about it. Yeah. It's just weird though how similar it is to the Crewe case though with stealing the meat cleaver, climbing through the window. That's very, you think the Black Hand would come with their own weapon.
Right.
I don't know. It's just so bizarre. Okay, so we've covered a lot so far, but the time frame where all these attacks are taking place, remember, it's pretty small. Like we talked about the Crewe's, they were attacked on August 12th, 1910. The Rosetos were attacked a month later on September 20th, and John Flannery was sent away to the mental institution in November of 1910. So we're talking August, September, October, 4 months. All of this happened in 4 months. So just wanted to kind of wrap that back up for you because it feels like it's been a really long time.
Yeah.
So, okay. So for a few months, everything in the Italian colony kind of seemed to be quiet as far as attacks on Italian grocery store owners. However, on June 27th, 1911, another attack happened. So let's see. they were the Rosetos, 7 or 8 months later, another attack happens. And so this gets us into the story of Joseph and Marie Davi, who were also Italian grocery store owners. So it's just crazy.
So crazy.
So we'll talk about their history, the family history a little bit. Joseph and his brother Pasquale, they actually came to America around 1904. And they were both born in Palermo, Sicily, and Joseph was born around 1885 and Pasquale somewhere around 1882. You know, it's funny, all of these stories in this episode, it was really hard to find family history on them for some reason. We work with what we can when we're talking the 1800s. So Pasquale, he worked on the docks, just kind of unloading boats and that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure what Joseph did when he first came to America. You know, maybe he kind of did the same thing as his brother. Who knows? But by 1911, he was running his own grocery store with his wife, Marie, or Mary. She went by both. So Marie, she was born around 1895 in Sicily, and her maiden name was Marino. And she came to America with her parents around 1901. And her father, Pasquale, he actually opened up a bakery shop, and it was known to be a pretty prominent shop in the Italian colony. So that's kind of cool.
Different from a grocery store.
Different from a grocery store, exactly. And Marie was described as being a beautiful and bright young woman. And I saw actually where Joseph, he was described as being, quote, a man of marvelous constitution. And I text Mom and I was like, do you know what this means? When I was researching this. And now I can't remember what we found.
A man or a person that just takes care of themselves.
That's right.
Goes by the rules, takes...
Kind of like a solid citizen.
There.
That's kind of a neat way to... I've never heard that before. It's kind of a cool way to describe somebody. And so Joseph and Marie, they married in New Orleans on January 29th, 1911, which is sad because it's actually 6 months before they were attacked. So let's go ahead and get into the night of the attack. Around 1 a.m. on June 27th, someone pried open the front door of the Davi's grocery store with a shoe hook. And according to Wikipedia, a shoe hook is a tool that is used to facilitate the closing of buttoned shoes, gloves, or other clothing. And so basically it's a hook that's fixed to a handle, and the handle they described as it could be decorative or very simple. I guess it depends on how much money you have. And it's just kind of part of the times, I guess, because we just don't have that kind of stuff anymore that I know of anyways. I mean, I'm not buttoning up gloves.
It just hooks and pulls it over.
Pulls it over. Yeah.
Before zippers
or Velcro. But I guess if you think back in the day, people dressed and more formally than we do. So I guess if you're by yourself trying to button up your pins on your or the buttons on your shirt, I don't know. That's crazy. So now it was reported that the door, it was actually broken, but there was also evidence that the assailant may have entered the grocery store through a window. So I don't know if the guy was trying to get through the door and couldn't get through it, so then moved to the window. Either way, once the assailant was in the house, he made his way through the grocery store back to where the couple's home was and into their bedroom. And so right outside of the bedroom, there was a trunk that appeared to be ransacked. So they're thinking that before this man entered the bedroom, he kind of went through the trunk, but later, the Davi said that nothing was stolen. So after the assailant went through the trunk, he had to open the bedroom door with a shoe hook because the couple kept their bedroom door locked. To be fair, like at first I was like, oh, were they trying to hide from enemies? Like, were they worried? But to be fair, these attacks are happening to Italian Americans, so they were probably scared. Like, hey, let's not only lock our front door, but let's also lock our bedroom door. So the assailant, he approached the bed and he cut away the mosquito netting. So that was similar to the first one, that was wrapped around the couple's bed. And he then struck Joseph first. He struck Joseph in the head multiple times. There was never a number given. It was just always referred to as multiple times. And so the police, they weren't sure at first what kind of a weapon the assailant was using, but they were sure that it was made of iron. Which I don't know how, but maybe just because of the blunt, like how hard it was. It hit Joseph. So then the assailant, he struck Marie 3 times. So Marie, she later told the police officers that after she was struck, she got up out of bed immediately and just kind of walked around the room, and the man was just watching her. So I think she was probably in shock, like, what is happening? And then she just laid back down in bed, And she said that she was so scared that the man would attack her again that she just laid completely still, and then she lost consciousness, and she doesn't know what happened after that.
I don't know how these people survived the initial attack.
I don't either. Yeah, well, sadly, Joseph, he doesn't.
No.
He passes away almost immediately. And the couple, they were actually discovered the next morning when two young boys came to buy something from the grocery store. And it was around 5 a.m. and they were shocked that the store wasn't open yet. So, they were knocking on the door. No one's coming. They can tell like nobody's moving around in the grocery store. And so they kind of started worrying about the couple, like what's happening here? And so they went to the neighbor's house and told them they feared something was wrong with Joseph and Marie. And so the neighbors came over and they knocked on the door. Nothing was going on. And so then they walked around the outside of the building to where the couple's dwelling was. And they knocked on another door, kind of probably more like the entrance to the home, but nobody came to the door. And so then they were kind of just walking around, and all of a sudden, Marie, she opens the bedroom shutters and then her window. So like she must have had shutters and opens the window, and the neighbors were shocked at the sight of her because she was bloody, and she was just kind of standing there, and they were like, "Where's your husband?" And Marie told the neighbors that he was sleeping, but someone had beat him badly. And so at this point, the neighbors, they were three men, they knew something was wrong. And so they rushed into the house and they found Joseph in bed. And I guess he was severely beaten and just bleeding from his head. And Marie, she had a broken nose and a slashed cheek. And so the men, they called for the police and an ambulance, and they took Joseph and Marie to the hospital. And Joseph, he was unconscious at this time. And
yeah, who knows how long the time frame is?
Yeah.
'Cause nobody knows when the attack happened.
No, and it did say, I think it said 3 a.m.
Oh, okay.
But you're kind of right because...
now it's after 5, so...
And that was coming from Marie. So... Oh, sorry. Marie said it was around 1 a.m. And so this is after 5. So if she was right about the time, which she may have been a little off because she was confused, you're talking 4 hours where Joseph is... Well, both of them are laying there very injured. Right. So the police, they investigated the crime scene and they noticed fingerprints on the wall, but it also looked like somebody had smeared blood on the wall with their hands. And so that kind of threw them off. They didn't really understand what was happening there. They said it kind of just looked like somebody took their hands and just smeared the blood. So it's a little strange.
Like trying to get it off of themselves? Or?
Kind of, yeah. But it would actually later be determined that it was Marie's fingerprints and her smearing. So when she was trying to get to the window, she had to use the wall to hold herself up. But that tells you how bad that scene was because that blood wasn't coming from her hand. It was her just supporting herself, and that blood was already on the wall. And so the police, they noticed that the 2 doors toward the back of that building were open. So they weren't sure why both of these doors were open, but they assumed the assailant escaped out of one of them. And so while the police were investigating, Joseph's brother, Pasquale, he came running into the home. And he had heard about the attack through the neighborhood. And the police, they tried questioning Pasquale, but he wasn't saying anything, and he was pretty emotionless. So they were kind of like...
Is he in shock?
Yeah, like what's happening with this guy? But then all of a sudden he screamed and said that he must go to the hospital to see his brother, and he took off running. So I think you're right. I think he was kind of like just in shock, like what has happened here? But one of the police officers, they caught him, and Pasquale collapsed, just kind of in the police officer's arm, and he was crying and screaming, and the police at this point had told him that Joseph wasn't expected to live. And this was just too much for him. The newspaper, it reported that when Pasquale, he collapsed, he just kind of started screaming out. And I'm just going to read what he said. He said, "My poor, poor brother," he cried. "How am I going to tell my mother and my other brother? Oh, my poor, poor brother. He's dead. But I swear before God that I swear I never kill him. If I know who killed my brother, I suck his blood." So I don't know with the suck blood part. I don't know if that's just the reporter throwing that in as flair, I have no idea. It's just really strange. It's very sad, though, because you can tell he's completely heartbroken over his brother. And so the police captain, he ordered that Pasquale be taken to the station for questioning. But Pasquale, he resisted and kept yelling that he just needs to go see his brother. And so apparently this police officer, he couldn't hold on to Pasquale. So a reporter actually jumped in to help hold down Pasquale. And the reporter, he said that Pasquale had a really powerful build, so he must have been a pretty strong guy. But Pasquale, he finally gave in and allowed the police to take him to the station. So the police, they take Pasquale, they're questioning him at the station, and then some police officers, they went to the hospital because they wanted to question Marie. And Marie, she told them that she thought the man, who she described as a white man, hit her over the head with a jar and demanded money. So just a forewarning, her story really jumps around a lot. I think it's just her memory starts coming back and she starts kind of remembering things. So just kind of hang in there with us a little bit because this gets a little wonky. Okay, so she said that she told the man where to find the money, but she didn't go get it herself. So it sounds like he went to get the money himself, but it actually came out later that no money was ever taken from the home. So it's hard to say. Like I said, she could be having memories come back. She could be thinking that happened and it never happened. It's, poor woman. I can't even imagine. So the police asked her, and this is where it gets really weird again, too. The police asked her if the man was Italian. And her answer is interesting. She said she wasn't sure, but he did speak to her in Italian, but he also spoke English. So that I'm not sure is kind of weird to me, like for her to say I'm not sure.
How many people knew Italian that weren't Italian?
Exactly, yeah. So the police, they didn't know what to make of this statement either. At first they thought that she was hiding something or she was just confused. But when they questioned her again at a later date, she said that the man only spoke English and spoke very good English. So I think she was just confused from her injuries. And you got to think, they're questioning her that morning of her attack. And she's probably worried about Joseph. And so the police, their first thought of what happened here was the Black Hand. They didn't really have any evidence for this. And so the police, they make a statement later saying, quote, they believe that one person committed all three crimes and that this person is some Italian who lives in the woods, probably in an old hut, and comes forth at night and cuts and slashes in a mad effort to either satisfy a craze for the sight of blood or to get money or both. So I don't know. It just makes me laugh because that's how they describe this.
Yeah, that's
suspect. They're just pulling this out of air.
Right. Why couldn't he have a house?
Exactly. It's like they're making him sound like a vampire who lives in the woods and comes out at night. Right. And then what I thought was very interesting though in this statement was they thought that he was responsible for all three crimes, which tells me at this point, have they ruled out Flannery, who is in an insane asylum right now? Kind of weird, right?
Yeah, because she recognized him, the first one.
Exactly. But who knows?
Yeah.
He could have been a customer in the store one day and she was like, oh, I know that face.
That's true.
So the police, they questioned Marie's family and her family told them that she had no, quote, sweetheart before Joseph. So, they were kind of ruling out that jealousy sort of thing. And her family said that they didn't suspect Joseph to have bad dealings either, and they were really worried about him. A classmate of Marie's came forward and said that, Marie was a really sweet girl and that she didn't have any enemies. And a neighbor of Joseph and Marie's came forward and was questioned as well. And he said that they were good people. He said Joseph was a stable and hardworking man. So the police, they were really left with, again, no suspects.
Right.
They couldn't even really pull in the Black Hand at this point. So, but sadly, the next day on Wednesday, June 28th, 1911, Joseph, he did pass away at Charity Hospital from his injuries. And Marie, she was devastated. In fact, the family, they actually didn't tell her for a couple of days because they wanted her to get a little bit better. But not only did she lose her husband, she was also pregnant and due to give birth in November.
Oh, wow.
I know. So it's sad because they were married in January, 6 months, then they get pregnant with their first child and they're running a grocery store. And then 6 months later, he dies.
Yeah, that's sad. I'm surprised, going through what she did, but she kept the baby.
Thank goodness, because that's a lot of trauma to go through,
Right.
Not only mentally, physically, everything. So, but the news of Joseph dying reached the governor, and he was very concerned at this point, and he actually offered a reward for the capture of the person who was slaying the Italian Americans in New Orleans. And the reward was for $500, which is about $17,000 today.
Wow.
So his name was Governor Jared Sanders. And Jared's my husband's name, so I like that name. And I'm glad this guy seems like a good guy from what I know. So the governor, he said that he believed it was the same person who attacked the Crews, the Rosetos, and the Davis. And this was now the belief of the police as well, and the citizens of New Orleans. So everybody at this point has kind of ruled out Flannery. So he's technically off the hook, but he remained in the mental institution. And so Detective John D'Antonio, who we mentioned earlier, he was put in charge of all of these cases. And it was said, because of his knowledge of the Italian colony, and he could connect with him, and they would open up more freely to him as well. They felt more comfortable with him. So, and so D'Antonio said that robbery, he didn't feel it was really the motive, but instead he said that it was, quote, "The suspect is a fiend, mad for the sight of blood." And I kind of agree with him a little bit. I mean, the Rosetos and the Davis, the guy didn't even take anything. And it was said, like, Marie had her jewelry sitting out, and with the Rosetos, there was money sitting in the grocery store register. So,
and no known enemies.
No known enemies. And it's like, what is this person doing? And so D'Antonio, he went on to say that he did not believe that this is the Black Hand, and he believed the key to finding the murderer is determining the motive. However, Joseph's brother Pasquale came forward and told the detectives a few days later that his brother did receive letters from the Black Hand.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So he said Joseph actually got 3 letters and ignored all of them. But Pasquale, he couldn't produce the letters for the detectives, which is fair. He didn't receive the letters. They were in the Davi's home. So that kind of changes it a little bit. But again, the similarities are so strange. They didn't take anything from the house. So you think they would have, if it was Black Hand, they would have took money.
Yeah, I don't know. Who they hire.
True. Like, just go do the deed. Don't take anything. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be.
I don't know.
Because after that first one, remember we kind of talked that it all went quiet, and
yes,
we were saying, did he start paying them off?
Started paying the Black Hand, and then the Black Hand left him alone. Like, okay, we'll protect your business now that you're paying us. Protect it from ourselves, because yeah, that's true. It's hard to say. But Joseph's body, it was sent to the morgue, and the coroner determined that it was a meat cleaver that killed him. So it's like I go back and I'm so torn on some of these between, is it the Black Hand or is it just this crazy person out there killing Italian Americans with a meat cleaver? Because it comes back to that over and over. I don't know. But afterwards, Joseph's body was sent to Marie's parents' house for viewing, and the funeral was held on June 29th. And this was the same day that Marie was released from the hospital. So poor woman. Man. But about a month and a half later, the police caught a break when on August 3rd, 1911, Marie, who was wearing all black and a black veil because she was in mourning, she walked into the police department carrying 2 letters.
Uh-oh.
Yep, she found some letters. So the 2 letters, they were from the Black Hand, and she told detectives that she found the letters in the bottom of one of her husband's trunks. And she said that what caused her to look for these letters was she had a dream that led her to believe the letters were real and in her possession. So, I'm sure Joseph didn't tell her that he received the letters. He probably didn't want to scare her. But after he died, I'm sure Pasquale told her about the letters. And so she had a dream. And the next day after her dream, her mother and Pasquale and her searched all of their belongings until they found the letters. But they could only find 2. So they actually printed the letters in the newspaper, which I thought was kind of cool because a Black Hand letter. Oh my gosh. And so I'm going to read them. So the first letter, they were written in Italian too. So this is Detective D'Antonio translated it for the newspapers. And so the first letter was postmarked May 1st, 1910. And it reads, "Dear friend, pardon me that we are going to bother you because we are in need and ask you to favor us with $200. Not to obligate yourself to us, but we want the sum as from a friend. You must come and deliver it yourself Tuesday morning. You start out of out of your house at 4:00 in the morning with your horse and take 2-Lane Avenue, the route that brings you to the Carlton Avenue. And when you meet a man, you will ask for a match. You will deliver to him the money. Be careful and do what we ask you. Otherwise, you will suffer the consequences.
Wow.
So there's the first letter. And the second letter arrived about a week after the first letter. And it says, your attention is called to the fact that we have respected you as a friend, but you have not done as we requested you to do. And now, if anything happens to you, don't feel sorry for it, because you have been warned. Be careful. We are after you, and don't forget it. You go and see some of your friends and everything can be fixed. But if you go to sleep over it, others will be awake. You will regret it. Pay attention. And by doing so, you will not be sorry. Everything can be arranged. Goodbye until Tuesday.
Goodbye until Tuesday.
I think because they wanted him, maybe they were saying like, meet us again on Tuesday, follow that same path. So that's a little scary. And, you know, there's another letter out there that nobody could ever find. And according to Pasquale, Joseph just ignored it.
Well, this sounds like the Black Hand.
It could be, yeah. And D'Antonio, he actually confirmed that these are genuine Black Hand letters. And so based off of this, the police kind of shifted their focus and they started looking for known members of the Black Hand. And they actually ended up arresting a Sam Pizzo and Philip Devano because they were known to threaten local Italians and their business and blackmail them. However, after numerous interviews, the two were released for lack of evidence. And that Sam Pizzo, I don't know if you're like, it's been a while, but in our first Esther Albano episode, Esther's mother, Josephine, kills Philip Pizzo.
Oh.
And so I went down another rabbit hole trying to see if there was a relation, but I couldn't find anything. So like the other two cases, this one went cold as well. After Sam Pizzo and Philip Devano were released, they had no other suspects. And so Marie, she wanted nothing to do with the grocery store. She had moved in with her parents at this time. She never wanted to go back into the home or the grocery store. And so on August 27th, 1911, the grocery store and all of the items in the grocery store were auctioned off. And a strange story happened a few months later after the attack. On September 7th, 1911, Pasquale was in a local grocery store and another man walks in and demands money from the grocery store owners. So you have to think about Pasquale here. He knows that his brother, who was a grocery store owner, was killed
by him.
He immediately is like, oh my gosh, this could be the guy that killed my brother. And so Pasquale, he attacks the guy and holds him down until the police can get there.
He was a strong guy.
He was a strong guy, exactly, yeah. So the police get there, they take the man. However, they were not able to connect it to any of these attacks. It sounds like it was just a quote regular robbery. I don't know how to say that, but they said that the man was very feeble and honestly couldn't hurt a fly.
I don't blame Pasquale.
Oh, gosh, no.
I would have done the same thing.
Me too. You're thinking like, oh my gosh, this could be the man that killed my brother.
All in the same little close community.
And how strange that he was in the store when that happened. It's so crazy. So on November 28th, 1911, Marie, she gave birth to a baby boy who she named Joseph Pasquale Davi.
Oh.
Yeah. And she and Joseph, so her son, they lived with her parents for many years. Sadly, I'm not sure what happened to Marie. I couldn't track her down after 1920 census. So hopefully she was able to move forward peacefully in life. Sadly, though, for Joseph Jr., he passed away at the age of 30 when he was struck and run over by a train.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm not sure about the details regarding this. I only found one article and that was it. So that's just so sad. So we're going to now jump back to John Flannery. The guy who was initially arrested for the Crewe case.
The first
one. He was in the mental institution. In 1912, he was declared sane and was going to be released from the mental institution.
So now he can go to trial.
He could go to trial. So when police heard that he was going to be released, they decided to see if they could prosecute him for the Crewe murders, or for the Crewe attacks. Sorry, because the Crews weren't murdered. But they didn't have enough evidence. And I mean, honestly, like, I can see how they didn't have enough evidence. And then you look at the other crimes that were so similar. How could they really prosecute him?
The only evidence was her identifying
him. Yep. Yeah, that was pretty much it. Exactly. Yeah. So, but because of this, Flannery was set free on March 9th, 1912. However, this did not end well for some citizens of New Orleans and for John. Because in August of 1916, a police officer spotted John attacking a 9-year-old boy. So the police officer, he sees John Flannery attacking this 9-year-old boy. He obviously goes to intervene and figure out what's going on. And the police officer tried arresting John, and John resisted arrest and started attacking the police officer. So the police officer, he shot and killed John. And so apparently John had kidnapped this child. And I'm not sure how long he held the child, but somehow either the child had escaped and John was trying to get him, and that's why he was attacking him, or John took him out in public. I don't know, but somehow he had kidnapped this boy. So I don't know the circumstances, and I don't know if I want to know the circumstances of what happened, but
the man wasn't mentally sane.
Exactly. So. The paper said that the boy was said to be okay. I mean, yeah, he probably wasn't like
physically,
yeah, exactly. Like he was expected to live, but what trauma did he go through? So with that really weird ending, I think we're actually going to call that good for this episode. Like I said, we covered those 3 families. And it's kind of hard because their stories are so similar, and so I think we're going to stop there, and we'll pick up next week with 3 more families, and we'll start with Anthony and Joanna Chambra. So I hope you all tune in for next week because we'll go through some more Axeman victims.
Yeah, that was a fun episode. It's just sad for all those people, but...
It is. It's just...
I think that John Flannery needed to be taken out, but that's my own personal...
yeah, he needed to stay somewhere where, like in the mental institution. I know mental institutions back then were not great quality, but, it's at the same time, he's released and he continues to hurt people. And I don't know, it's just... I don't think that he was involved in the Crewe attack.
Right.
Especially because the next attack was so similar. So
correct. Yeah, I think that Black Hand had something.
With one of them,
One of them, yeah.
Yep. Well, we hope you enjoyed listening to these sad stories, and we hope you come back to listen to more stories about Italian Americans. See you next time.
See you next time.